this is The Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. As I do in the beginning of each episode of my podcast, mention social media. I'll link that in this episode. And to add on to that, I am on Substack, have writings on Substack, and this is a supplement to my podcast. And to add on to that, if you enjoy my content, or my writing content, please follow and support. And also my podcast content, give me comments about that. Follow me on social media, and then, email me about comments, questions, concerns. Greatly appreciate it. I appreciate all you listeners out there. Now, audio platforms, I am on Spotify for podcasters, Pandora. I'm on Pocket Cast, Overcast, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and I'm looking to grow to wherever you enjoy your podcast. I am on that. Now, this episode is about the Norman Rockwell painting that's depicting Thanksgiving. So I'm going to talk about that and the background of Norman Rockwell and give my thoughts and opinions and everything else. So let's talk about it. Okay, so my thoughts on Norman Rockwell and the painting and his paintings and Thanksgiving painting. My thoughts on that are, I think they're really good examples of what the values come from when you come from a small town. You get a shared sense of the importance of being a part of a community. You get a shared sense of the values of having patriotism. You get a shared sense of the values of family. And Norman Rockwell, he even went and painted and showcased the realities of the world around him. For instance, the Brown versus the Board of Education. He did a painting on that, and giving his interpretation about the issues and the importance of civil rights and the dark times, unfortunately, that went on in America with race issues. And instead of painting things only from his point of view and seeing things only from a bubble of what he wants to talk about, or playing things safe, or not doing things where he wouldn't offend anybody. He didn't. He just was open and respectful enough to do things like that. And I think the Thanksgiving painting is another example too, of showing the importance of what happens when you bring the values of family into the perspective, and more along the lines of the perspective of the American culture. Because without families, and particularly families who stick together, it creates, in my opinion, a sense of isolation, to where in that isolation you find division, and then in that division you're lost, and then you have a society that isn't stable enough to have a idea of what is right, what is wrong, a strong sense of moral compass. So people are protected and people feel safe and comfortable. And I think that's unfortunately what is going on in society today. I mean, this isn't anything new, the going in against the grains, going away from American values, or going away from moral culture, went on in his time. But it's just unfortunate that that's something that's still present in today's culture, and even a strong presence in today's culture. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Norman Rockwell and the Thanksgiving painting. Okay, so Norman Rockwell's Freedom from Want is the Thanksgiving painting we know without even necessarily knowing its name. It appeared in the March 6, 1943 edition of the Saturday Evening Post. It depicts a middle-class family seated around a crisply adorned dining table. As was common for Rockwell, his models for the painting were his friends, family, and neighbors in the town of Arlington, Vermont. He photographed in his studio and painted in the complex composition individually, which means that they did not sit together. Now, all of this information will be linked in this episode, along with the information in the background about him. Now, Rockwell's wife appears on the left side of the table. The family cook, Mrs. Thaddeus, I believe, Wheaton, was the model for the elderly matriarch serving the turkey. She did, in fact, cook the meal used in the painting. Rockwell joked about eating the turkey later. Opinions on the famous image are mixed. Many a critic has dismissed it as kitsch, and Rockwell himself thought it lacked a wallop. But many more treasured the image. Deborah Solomon, his biographer, goes so far as to call the light-filled canvas one of the most ambitious plays of the white angst since Whistler's Symphony in White No. 1. Though similarly, for some familiar, there are plenty of details you might have missed about Freedom from Want. Now I'm going on to give you some facts about it, the painting. This Thanksgiving painting has 3 facts that just might change the way you see it. Okay. The military hated it until they loved it. The scene was one in a series of 4 paintings Rockwell made in response to Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1941 Statue of the Union address known as the 4 Freedoms. The other freedoms were freedoms of speech, freedom of worship, and freedom from fear. Rockwell had originally wanted to paint the series for the military, and hoping for a commission, sent a charcoal sketch for the 4 Freedoms painting to the Office of War Information, or otherwise known as OWI. Not only did the brass turn it down, they twisted the knife, writing, "The last war you illustrators did in the poster. This will be the last war you illustrators did in the poster. The war we're going to use with a fine art man, real artist." Saturday Evening Post editor Ben Hibbs, however, was enthusiastic, and he was right. So popular whereas the image, in fact, that the magazine decided to offer prints for sale. The OWI, which had turned down Rockwell's just a few months earlier, asked to use prints of the paintings in a war-bound campaign that would ultimately garner over $132 million in bonds and stamps. In the end, millions of posters of Rockwell's paintings were distributed across the country, posted in schools, libraries, and post offices. Some were worried it was a little bit too much. Though freedom from want was enthusiastically embraced by the American public, in Europe, the happy scene left a bitter taste as the population endured ongoing hardship with wartime. Winking at art history. The military may have dismissed him as not a real fine art man, but Rockwell, who had never claimed to be anything more than an illustrator, was in fact a wellspring of art historical knowledge and composition study, that is. The Last Supper, arguably art history's most famous meal, was definitely on his mind. Like Leonardo da Vinci's version, the central figures in Freedom from Want are framed by a window with the perspective lines converging to focus attention on them. And Rockwell's humble tablecloth, even it echoes those in the cloth covering Christ's table in the Leonardo depiction. Most importantly, The Last Supper also provides a source for the central trope of Rockwell's painting. Famously, in The Last Supper, the apostles took away from Christ, absorbed in the swirl of their own thoughts and conversations. The same is noticeably true in the family as it is depicted in the painting in Freedom from Want, who are observed with everything but the turkey being served. This art historical echo also makes the turkey into a sacrament. The man on the bottom right of Rockwell's painting, whose partial face glances out, cinematically has garnered a lot of critical speculation. His features are based on Rockwell's neighbor, Jim Martin, from the artists include which of is For Freedom's paintings. But Martin's fourth wall breaking also riffs on another Renaissance trope, in which one figure stares out from an otherwise self-contained canvas as if to invite the viewer into the composition. Now, Botticelli, for instance, used a self-portrait in his 1475 De Adorno of the Magi, which in the same way at the bottom right. And Diego Rivera, the Mexican muralist, was inspired to his craft by Renaissance art. And his famous Detroit industrial mural, completed 10 years before Rockwell's Saturday Evening Post profile, he similarly inserted the figure of his patron in the lower right corner, looking out. All right, so let's get on to the background of Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell received his first commission at age 17. In 1916, he created the first of 321 covers for the Saturday Evening Post. Rockwell's Americana images were loved by the public, but not embraced by critics. He created World War II posters and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977. By the age of 14, he had wanted to be an artist and began taking classes at the New School of Art. By 16, Rockwell was so intent on pursuing his passion that he dropped out of high school and enrolled in the National Academy of Design. He later transferred to the Art Students League of New York. Upon graduating, Rockwell found immediate work as an illustrator for Boys Life magazine. By 1916, at the age of 22, he had painted his first cover for the Saturday Evening Post, which it began a 47-year relationship with the iconic American magazine. And all of this information will be linked in this episode, and if you want to read further along and find out more, feel free. And in all, Rockwell painted 321 covers for the Post. Some of his most iconic covers included the 1927 celebration of Charles Lindbergh's crossing of the Atlantic. He also worked for other magazines, including Look, which in 1969 featured a Rockwell cover depicting the imprint of Neil Armstrong's left foot on the surface of the moon after the successful moon landing. In 1920, the Boy Scouts of America featured a Rockwell painting in its calendar. Rockwell continued to paint for the Boy Scouts for the rest of his life. Now on to more about the commercial success. Now, in the 30s and the 40s, they proved the most fruitful period for Rockwell. Now, in 1939, Norman was offered the perfect material for the artist to draw from. Rockwell's success stemmed to a large degree from his careful appreciation for everyday American scenes, the warmth of small town life in particular. Often what he depicted was treated with a certain simple charm and a sense of humor. Some critics dismiss him for not having real artistic merit, but Rockwell's reasons for painting what he did were grounded in the world that was around him. Goes on to say, this is what he stated: maybe as I grew up and found the world wasn't the perfect place I had thought it to be, I unconsciously decided that if it wasn't an ideal world, it should be. And so he painted only the ideal aspects of it, as he said. Still, Rockwell didn't completely ignore the issues of the day. In 1943, inspired by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, he painted the 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. The painting appeared on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post and proved incredibly popular. The paintings was also depicting, and it raised in the U.S. in excess of $130 million toward the war effort. In 1953, the Rockwells moved to Stockport, Massachusetts, where Norman would spend the rest of his life. Now, Rockwell ended his relationship with the Post and began doing covers for Look. His focus also changed as he turned more of his attention to the social issues facing the country. Much of the work centered on themes covering poverty, race, and the Vietnam. Now this reaches the end of the Hard Green Light. Tune in and turn up. Bye-bye now.